And again, welcome to Mill Valley Zen winter practice period. Um, really pleased to see you all and to be here. So the plan for this evening and most of our Wednesday meetings is we'll sit together for 30 minutes and then I'll make a short presentation, and then we'll get into most of the time we'll do some kind of breakouts, get into groups, into small groups to talk about a particular topic or question, and then we'll have time for an open discussion. And you probably noticed that I've scheduled monthly teas. And I think you should have those dates, but January 16th, February 13th, and March 13th, 9 a.m. I think 9 a.m. to like 10:30 Pacific time. And it's a time both, I think, for maybe a combination of just a little bit more study and more time to connect with other people in the practice period. And I'll also send out this week a suggested buddies. I think it's a useful and important part of practice period is to have someone who you are having a regular conversation with. It can be weekly or every other week. You can decide, just as a way of checking in with someone. And I'll send out some suggested structure for those buddy conversations. So one of the things that I'm excited about for this practice period is that we're going to be reading, studying a very kind of revered, famous Zen Buddhist text called the Genjo Koan, and it is a somewhat famous piece of writing by a Zen teacher named Dogen, who was born in the year 1200, and who was an amazing human being, amazing scholar. And he, it's said that it was when he was 9 years old and his mother died, and there was a ceremony of offering incense. And as he was sitting in a room with the body of his dead mother and watching the smoke from this incense arise and float away, he was just so profoundly moved by these questions of birth and death and change and impermanence, and he really wanted to find a different way of understanding his life. And he was ordained as a monk when he was quite young, and he also somewhat had this, in addition to the burning question about birth and death, one of the teachings of Zen practice and that of Buddhist practice is this sense that, that that enlightenment and awakening is that we're already fully awake. And it didn't quite sit well with him, and he kept asking this question of if we're already fully awakened human beings, then why do we practice? And he started traveling around Japan, talking to teachers from many different Buddhist traditions, trying to find an answer. And he just was not satisfied. And he was told that in order to satisfy his great interest, curiosity, sincerity, that he needed to travel to China, and that's where the most revered Zen masters were residing, and uh, he ventured to China when he was in his early 20s, and um, spent 5 years traveling around China, and was able to find some teachers that he were able to answer his questions. And yeah, and this essay that we're going to be studying is called the Genjo Koan, and we'll be using this book called Realizing Genjo Koan by Shohaku Okamura. And Dogen was 27 years old when he wrote this piece, and there was a collection of um, many different pieces of his writing, and he positioned this piece as the first one, and um, and there's something about his journey and our journey, and looking at the journey of what it's like for us. And this Genjo Koan is sometimes translated as the uh, you know, the koan, or the mystery of uh, everyday life. And one of the things that has always attracted me to Buddhist practice and Zen practice is that uh, the study isn't so much about scholarship. It's more, what we're really studying is our lives. We're studying our awareness, our consciousness, uh, our relationships, what we love, what we hate, uh, everything that it's all that, that the word, to me, the word Zen is really just a kind of a placeholder for human being, that we're studying what it means to be human, what it means to be alive. And this text that we're going to be working with, Genjo Koan, the right. So these were written, in this is a Japanese word, and the word gen means to appear or to show up, but to show up like the moon appearing from behind the clouds. Uh, the word gen is sometimes translated as mystery. It's actually the first part of the Buddhist name that I was given. Uh, my Buddhist name is Gen. Gen is the first character, and Mon, which in Japanese means gate, and I've generally seen it translated as mysterious gate, and that I was given this name as uh, that my path was to allow for more mystery in my own life, as a way of, I think, balancing my own tendency to want more clarity, more explanation. So Gen is a little bit like, right, this image of the moon appearing from behind the clouds. So it's a combination. The word Gen is showing up and appearing from mystery. And the second part, the character Jo, means to complete or to accomplish. So the word genjo means to appear or to actualize or to manifest. And most of you, maybe all of you, are familiar with the second word in the title of this essay, right? So Genjo koan. Koan is kind of become more of a common word. Koans are usually thought of as being stories that are kind of used as a way of developing more insight. Um, in Rinzai Zen, which is a core school of Zen, koans are used very much as like riddles to be solved, and there's a ongoing way that these koans are used very very specifically as teaching devices. In Soto Zen, which is the other school of Zen, which is the school that Dogen, so Dogen founded the Soto Zen school of Buddhism in Japan, but it actually first, Soto Zen was first developed in China in like the year, like the sixth century China. And in Soto Zen, koans are not so much thought of as things to be solved, but more phrases, stories to turn and work with. So, and in this book, Realizing Genjo Koan, Shohaku Okamura talks about that the word koan literally means the equality of all things and the sense of integrating difference and equality. And he uses, as an example, he uses the 5 fingers of our hand. And so if we, our hand is made up of 5 independent fingers, and at the same time, it's one hand. And he's using this as a metaphor for all of the ways that the world can be seen through this lens of difference and equality. So this is a core tenet of Buddhist understanding and philosophy, this sense of difference and equality, sometimes talked about using the language of the absolute and the relative, right? And that we live in this relative world of good and bad, of this and that, of 5 fingers, of that we are separate, but from the perspective of the absolute, there's just one world. Without what does the world look like when we let go of any sense of distinction? And again, and in Zen practice and in Dogen's practice, these two ideas are integrated and combined. It's sometimes said, that we can find the absolute within the relative and the relative within the absolute. So Genjo Koan you could say it means to answer this question of what is reality, what does it mean to be a full human being through the practice of our everyday activity. And I want to share a poem that I think is a wonderful expression of this this idea, this mystery, this question about how can we find our lives? How can we live our lives in as much reality through the practice of our everyday activity. And this poem, this is a poem by a 13th. It's interesting that this poet Hafez lived, I believe, at around the same time as Dogen, 13th century, but in another part of the world, in Persia. And this poem is called Tripping Over Joy. What is the difference between your experience of existence and that of a saint? The saint knows that the spiritual path is a sublime chess game with God, and that the beloved has just made such a fantastic move that the saint is now continually tripping over joy and bursting out in laughter and saying, "I surrender." Whereas you, my dear, I'm afraid you still think you have 1,000 serious moves. Right? So what is the difference between your experience of existence and that of a saint? The saint knows that the spiritual path is a sublime chess game with God, and that the beloved has just made such a fantastic move, that the saint is now continually tripping over joy and bursting out in laughter and saying, "I surrender." Whereas you, my dear, I'm afraid you still think you have 1,000 serious moves. So I think that this poem is much like this question of, I think Hafez is suggesting that we embrace more a sense of the absolute world, and that he is laughing, the world where we can laugh at ourselves and laugh and appreciate even the crazy, insane, difficult things that are happening, or the minute struggles and strains of our everyday lives, that we somehow find a way to embrace and enter and live with a sense of incredible sacredness and joy right in the midst of as we live with incredible awareness and integrity in our relative worlds as well. And I think this is the terrain of practice period and the terrain of this piece of writing by Dogen called the Genjo Koan.